Hey everybody, it's Tripl-L here to talk about the My Hero Academia Chapter 370 spoilers. I'm so excited. It's finally happening, friends. We're finally here. The Shoji plotline. The man's been talking about it for years, constantly telling us that Shoji was doing his best, and now we can actually see what Shoji's best looks like. Is it in fact better than Izuku's best? Probably. He's gone through way more than Izuku ever has. Alright. Definitely before UA, he's gone through way more than Izuku has. Definitely. Actually, no. Like even post UA, he lost an arm. It's just like he can regrow them. That's overall, I think he's gone through more. But you don't know that because I haven't told you the spoilers yet. Let me get into the spoilers here, all right? I just switched the screen there just to make it a little bit easier. So let's get into this. So the chapter begins with a flashback from Spinner's hometown. People are throwing stones at him, saying that he's a disgrace to their town and that humans, or like that mutants will never be accepted no matter how much the time changes. The flashback ends with him facing the ocean. Next, there's some context on what's happening. All for one assumed that Kurogiri would be at Central Hospital and sent Spinner, some of the remnants of the PLA, and several civilians who followed them to attack the place. Okay, that makes sense. There are about 15,000 people there, most of them mutants. The heroes are trying to contain them, but counting the police, they number only 200. So this is just because, like, you can kind of understand what's happening here, right? This is just a mass of people rioting. That's why it makes it a little bit harder. And the thing here is, like, and in the Hero Academia world, everyone has the potential to be carrying a bazooka pretty much, right? Because everyone has quirks. Mike thinks to himself that Shirakumo has become quite popular and attacks with a loud out shout. I saw the image for that. It looked pretty good. One of the mutants stops the sound from getting through with his own body. A mutant shark then tries to hit Mike, but Koda controls some birds and protects him. He says that he got separated from Shoji. I think that's Koda saying that. So, again, you have to like really appreciate what happened here, because Shoji and Koda, both of the big mutants of Class 1A, got put in front of the guy who's the poster boy for mutant discrimination, right? This was a very transparent thing that happened when Horikoshi showed the matchups here. The whole thing with Shoji, it was like, yeah, he has to be against Spinner. So like, I do want to point out just that this is a very forced thing. You can definitely see the author's hand here. There is no world in which this is not fate taking control, and in this case, fate is the author's hand. But there's nothing wrong with that. Like Shoji, that Spinner is the only person he's going to be able to work off of, but unfortunately we have to talk about something that happens here in the spoilers. Anyway, the cops want to call for reinforcements, but their chief says it's impossible and tells them to use the taser shields to push the mutants away. Several mutants have gathered around Rocklock and he tells them to stop, but they have furious expressions. They say that people with a human appearance will never understand what they are feeling. Okay, they have Spinner flags and t-shirts. They begin to attack Koda, who's knocked to the ground. He doesn't understand why this is happening, and one of the mutant calls him a traitor and asks if he grew up in a big city. Like the images that you'll see here is that a lot of mutants grow up well in big cities. And the idea is like, okay, you know, like this problem isn't in the big cities. It's a rehash, or not rehash, it's a reiteration of what Spinner told us, that in the boonies or in the rural areas, there's not a lot of hero enforcement, which again is one of the spots that just reminds you this whole idea about hero society being saturated does not make sense in any which way. It's not saturated. It's not oversaturated. It's concentrated, because again, like the whole situation with the mutants doesn't spiral out of control if there actually is a lot of heroics going on in the rural parts of the country. Anyway, we then see that one of the PLF generals is giving a speech on top of a building. The one they're talking about is the one that wears like a black mask and he looks like kind of like a puppet kind of thing. He takes off his mask in this chapter. He says that court counseling is useless and that they directly deal with the consequences. Now, we actually don't know what court counseling is. People have talked about it, but we don't know what it is. So Horikoshi keeps this as a little bit of a black box, because probably detailing this would probably break things down, because when you start looking at the little details, there's a good possibility you could start making some arguments, especially in this situation where things are kind of charged. And like with the way that the mutants are acting right now, it doesn't paint them in a very good light, and it ultimately makes them look kind of stupid, but we have to get to that part still. He then mentions Incident 66. which is definitely a reference to Order 66 and the Great Purge of Jeddah, as examples of mutant groups being exterminated by people who simply said that they were gross. And while it looked like things improved with Nezu and other mutants occupying position of power, walking freely on the streets, it's just make pretend. So the imagery that came along with these ones was pretty graphic. I thought really well done on that part. Now the whole thing about just making pretend, not really. Like, this is just an issue of like cities are more progressive. Non-mutants are still the majority, and the education system does not teach proper acceptance of differences. Many people still feel that same disgust that those responsible for the massacres felt. So that line just saying that many people in the current era still look down on the mutants. He then takes off his mask. The summary doesn't explain it, but like he has some scars on his head, and says that they have never felt the light of heroism shining on them. They have all thought at least once that they'd be better off without their quirks. He says that mutants don't recognize the heroes as their saviors. The one who will guide society to a better path is Spinner. As he says this, we again see the Spinner flag and several mutants cheering for him, saying that they will lead the way and that he must win. Here we go. But Spinner doesn't even understand what they are talking about. All that goes through his head are keywords like all for one and power. So here is the big thing, right? And this is the unfortunate thing that comes out here. The mutants are fundamentally in a bad spot because their so-called savior, they know so little about him that they are unable to see that he is being manipulated, and he has quite literally been made a giant useful idiot. That's what all these people are. They're giant useful idiots. And this is what All for One kind of does. When you don't really have a high school education, you're just putting yourself in a position where All for One's going to come in and tell you what you want to hear, and then just use you like pieces on a chessboard. That's what's going on here. That's what mutants are. He doesn't really care about them. He's just taking advantage of the rage, and then their big figurehead, the one that's supposed to be leading them, look at what he's thinking about, right? So this is a pretty bad situation here for Spinner, and it's probably one of the things that Horikoshi's going to use to make the mutants look wrong here, because they ultimately need to be defeated, even though, you know, you have this, like, this is a legitimately charged situation. The other thing here too is that Shoji already in this chapter is being put in a position where he's not only pointing out the issues with what the mutants are doing, but he's showing the better way of going about things. And I'm doing quotations because you got to be like very careful now. And you know what? I'm like really try to stay away from allegory on this one. Don't try to make any allegories. Just take all this material in the context of Hero Academia. He then prepares to attack two cops. But Shoji appears and attacks him with an Octo Brawl. So just make sure this is like talking about Spinner. Spinner's about to attack two cops, but Shoji appears and attacks him with Octo Brawl. The mutants immediately advance on him, calling him a traitor and saying they'll kill him. Okay, so they're going to kill another mutant for trying to keep things under control. Not very great people. He then briefly remembers people who also wanted him dead because of how he looks when he was younger, and asks what attacking the hospital has to do with their cause. He says that in the previous war, the first thing the heroes did was ensure the safety of the patients on Jakku Hospital, something that the mutants didn't even think about. And of course, like, the bigger thing here is to say, like, what if there are, because these people are extremists, you have to say, what if there are mutant kids in there who are just trying to recover after the last whooping Higantomakia gave the entirety of Japan? What if there's a bunch of kids who are still wounded from that time, and you guys are just not making the situation better? Anyway, we then see a flashback of Shoji with bandages on his face and facing the ocean just like Spinner. So this is like the other big issue, or not big issue, this is the other big technique coming in here. Horikoshi is really forcing the situation with Spinner and Shoji by putting them in similar positions in their past, right? And the reason he does that is because, like, the only way to kind of navigate the situation in his mind is to create the contrast and make it very apparent to show that there was a better way for Spinner here. The issue here, though, is that Spinner doesn't have autonomy. Spinner is an extension of All for One right now. So you're not going to really have meaningful dialogue, because Spinner himself, his character isn't about mutant liberation. His character is about being a follower. His character is about radicalization. You quite literally see a guy with no purpose, beaten down by life, trying to find meaning in his life. And where he's found his meaning, unfortunately, he's being manipulated. Like, really, he just wants to play video games with Shigaraki. But this is the big issue here. Spinner is just a pawn, and he's been forced to be a pawn at this point. He asks once again if they're thinking about the consequences of their actions, and that if they're not, he will not forgive them. In the panel, we finally see Shoji's face. We've seen Shoji's face in like sketches before. It doesn't look that different. Overall, you know, a lot of tricky little techniques that are coming out from the chapter. One of the big issues here is definitely the issue of Spinner's lack of autonomy, because that doesn't give Shoji a lot to work with, and instead you have to force a situation where readers understand that Shoji has gone through a similar point in his life that Spinner went through. And overall, what Shoji's pointing out here is valid. Another like little thing that comes out from this chapter is that, you know, you're getting mentions of these big situations that happened before, and unfortunately we didn't know about these situations before. Like, quite literally, the only reason you knew that Shoji was going to get his plot line was because the author kept talking about it. But yeah, no, now that we're here, given how heavy-handed this is, I do kind of expect to see more heavy-handedness from Horikoshi in the upcoming chapters. I expect to see a very aggressive flashback with Shoji talking to the animal girl that was being discriminated against in the previous chapters. I expect to see also a flashback of Shoji talking about how Pony made that comment about not liking octopus or something like that, and, you know, saying it in reference to Shoji. Like, a lot of little things I think the author's going to bring back just to kind of grease the wheels and show that this has been happening in the background. But right now, with the flashback of Shoji having the same imagery as the flashback of Spinner, this is it. This is his enemy. Unfortunately, Spinner doesn't have his rational faculties. One thing here is that the reason you remove the faculties from Spinner is because you maybe can't get the fight between Shoji and Spinner properly, and also it makes the extremists look really stupid, because it shows how, like, in their rage, they can't see that Spinner himself is suffering by the one that, you know, apparently is on their side all for one. Overall, you know, there's a lot of really cool imagery in the chapter that I can't talk about because of spoilers, or because, you know, like, Shueisha actually does strike down images like that, and it would be illegal for me to show it. But it is a very interesting chapter, and I am excited to see the full thing coming up, you know, on official release on Sunday. Anyway, guys, let me know what you thought down below. I'm just very excited that we're finally getting a Shoji plotline. Given the heavy-handedness here, we're probably going to see an aggressive push on Shoji's side to show that he is the one in the right, because this is kind of what you have to do in the situation. Yeah, guys, let me know what you thought down below, and until next time, I hope you have an absolutely great day.